Ashley, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, really excited to hear your story. I've seen you in a lot of Zooms in the Sub2 group. And
Oh,
so
thanks.
now it's like we get to, now you're like a celebrity coming into my world.
Oh, thank you. I honestly, it's still kind of one of those moments of I can't really believe where we're at either. And
Mm.
so it feels a little out of place sometimes, probably like a little imposter syndrome a little bit, but I think that's part of the journey of like progressing and learning and elevating yourself is that depending on how fast you're doing that, you might turn around and not recognize like who you are anymore and realize, oh, I'm a totally different person now. But it's fine. Everything's fine.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up. And I definitely want you to introduce yourself. But that story is uh, about a year ago, I was having trouble like getting keeping everything organized, like most people do. And so I went to the top tier. Anybody who had a top tier TC badge, I just started messaging, "Hey, I have this thing going on. Are you interested in exploring this?" And so the person I started working with, her name's Caitlin Beals. Um, I think at that point she had just completed the course and was brand new in real estate, and now she's got like two flips under contract that she's about to work on. And it was like who she was a year ago versus who she is now is a completely different person.
Yeah. Well, and funny story where, it goes full circle when they're like, "Oh, you can meet anybody within 5 people or something like that."
Mhm.
I actually remember Caitlin's first day. I was in her very first Zoom when
Yeah.
she first started that whole journey, and I remember when she connected with you, and I've watched this progression from like a
Yeah.
teaching coaching standpoint with her
Mhm.
inside of Top Tier. And it's been so fun to watch her grow and to watch you and your businesses grow and watch these skills grow. It's just been so fun. And I think I might also have an addiction to like watching people grow because it's such a great time. It's like the best Netflix series ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like real is not scripted. This is what happens.
Yes.
But tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I have a very diverse, wide array of background stories, so I'm gonna try to decide how far to go exactly. But basically, about 3 years ago, so 2022-ish, I decided to step into the realm of real estate investing. I wasn't sure exactly where I was gonna fit at first, but I eventually settled on being a transaction coordinator. And within a year, I had learned how to be a TC, and then I'd also started my own team and business, and I had developed education systems and all this stuff that caught the eye of um, Pace Morby and Molly Tennant, his COO, and their team. And they were actually developing an education system for TCs at that very same time. And they
Right.
like, we should work together. And so I did my part just as like a participant teacher, I guess, of here's what I wish I would have known, here's what I have now, and we just kind of combined forces and Top Tier TC launched in 2023 and it was such a momentous moment because there hadn't been anything like that up until that
Mhm.
point. I still don't think there really is anything for creative transaction coordinators. And then that has been around for a little over a year at this point, and I've developed from a participant coach teacher into Molly's right hand. So I'm like her director of operations for
Mhm.
all of the things that we do now. And I almost exclusively work with efficiency, operation, structure. I build systems. I'm like this architect now of helping to scale our businesses and the communities and all of that stuff.
That's so interesting. Are you actually the one building it, or are you designing it and you have someone else helping you build it?
It depends on what we're talking about exactly.
Mhm.
If we're talking about like education material and stuff that we're trying to use for the communities, it's usually me.
Mhm.
And we pull in experts and influencers and different people with expertise out of the communities to help be the instructors and the guides for
Mhm.
that. But in terms of the actual structural architecture, it's usually me because I'm like, we had to have all these learning points and we got to make sure that we're hitting these milestones for the education part of it as quickly as we can.
Mhm.
But then we also have like efficiency stuff like Monday templates and project management stuff and team communication. So I work on those aspects too. And if I feel like I'm the best fit to build those things, then I will usually do that. But I have been learning the power of delegation,
Mhm.
and it has been a very rough lesson for me the last year or so. But just like Dan says, we're both in that community and it's so amazing. He's like
Mhm.
80% done by someone else is 100% awesome when you're trying to learn to really maximize your time for monetization and efficiency. You have to learn how to do that. So sometimes,
Mhm.
yes, hopefully it's mostly no. That is my answer officially. Hopefully it's mostly not me building it, but I definitely design 100% of it right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's something that I had trouble with because my whole career up until now has been to be in the weeds and do the thing, but I don't enjoy it.
No.
I can build it. I know how to make it run efficiently, but I don't want to go and actually build it.
No. And I admire that so much because being in the weeds is something that is uncomfortable. And
Mhm.
if you're like, I can deal with the discomfort, I'm like, I'm so glad because I don't know how long I could stay in the weeds. But I
Yeah.
love when people go in the weeds and then they bring the thing to me. They're like, I found this thing and this is the problem. I'd be like,
Yeah.
great, give that to me. I'll fix it. Go find another.
Yeah.
But so no, I hope we get to talk about this a little bit more on your journey today, is that like being in the weeds, even though it's so uncomfortable
Mhm.
and it has that discomfort aspect to it, that is where so much leveling up and so much learning happens that it's usually worth it, even though it's really uncomfortable.
Oh yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. So talking about being in the weeds,
Mm.
cold calling is one of the things that I had started off doing because I thought that was my what I was
Hmm.
supposed to do,
Yeah.
and terrible at it.
Yeah.
But because of these conversations I had where I had people hanging up on me, insulting me, cursing at me, it makes all these other conversations so much easier.
I bet you're like, got nothing on this other conversation I've had to
Yeah,
deal with. You built those calluses, right? Like you went in
yeah,
the weeds and you built those calluses. You're like, ooh, that was not fun, not exciting at all. And it made everything else easier because you went and paid that price.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. So you were in teaching and education, right?
So that's like the really, really far back story. Before I jumped into business and real estate stuff, I was a stay-at-home mom and I was homeschooling my kids. And I actually have a bachelor's degree in secondary education. I never wanted to teach adults, which is absolutely comical when you think about
Uh-huh.
where I'm at right now. But so yeah, I have my teaching degree. During COVID, I was very fortunate to be able to just take over my kids' education because so many schools and so many teachers, like all around the world, were
Mhm.
really struggling with trying to make that transition. And I felt for them so much because I wouldn't want to try to teach like 30 kids remotely with no resources or any idea how to do that.
Yeah.
And so when that all happened, I've just brought my kids home and we just started doing homeschool. I'd never done it before, was totally figuring it out, but I was lucky that I already had all of these skills that I'd gotten in
Yeah.
college to make it fun and move forward with our progress.
That's so interesting. So you went from education, I mean, so you're doing homeschooling. We actually homeschool right now as well, but my wife doesn't have the luxury of having a degree in
That's
education,
okay.
so
It
it's been
probably
a
gets in the
struggle.
way half the time. If you've got those like preconceived notions of this is how education's supposed to be, probably
Yeah.
gets in the way most of the time.
I guess, but I mean, with education, is it more in the classroom or how did you, I guess, what was your journey through education?
So oh, man, this is such a crazy story, but when I was going through college, the semester before I was getting my license, so I was doing my student teaching in the classes. They actually implemented the Common Core curriculum, which
Mhm.
completely changed how teachers were able to teach. And so I actually didn't receive instruction that was supportive of how I was supposed to transition to do that. Felt like a fish out of water going and doing my student teaching that semester because I had no resources or idea of what I was trying to do. But I still survived, still got through. And after that point, I tried to get some jobs in education in a couple different states because we moved around a little bit. But I realized that the change to Common Core actually shifted my perception of what I thought education was supposed to be and what it wasn't. And I actually didn't align with being a teacher in the classroom anymore and tried to find different ways to teach after that.
That's very interesting because it a lot of the time, a lot of the things that you're talking about, you didn't have a blueprint of how to proceed, but you just figured it out.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think it's a muscle, and I'm grateful that I got to start learning that muscle early, but um yeah, it was a little interesting road where I actually ended up taking jobs and creating my own teaching. Like I would teach piano or I would teach English because that was one of my specialties, or I would try to teach anything. I just tried to teach anything that I could because I love teaching. But it just didn't align with me to work as a teacher anymore once they made that change. And it was very sad and unfortunate. But I feel so lucky that this opportunity came up where I got to start teaching adults. And I know we talked about this a little bit where you get to teach people who actually want to be there. It's a
Yeah.
totally different experience.
Yeah.
Um, and I dealt with my own insecurities and my imposter syndrome with that whole thing, and now I just love it. I just love sharing everything that I know and learn with people who are here to learn and experience those same things, because when you watch somebody learn something 3 or 4 times faster than it took you to learn it, it's just so satisfying.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a nice feeling when you just say, "Oh, why don't you do this or this?" And then they say, "Oh, I never thought about like that." And to
Yeah.
you, it's just like there.
Well, we went in the weeds and we're like,
Yeah.
oh, this is different. I didn't notice it was different from way back there. I had to get in
Mhm.
here and get my hands dirty before I figured that out. Let me save those people the
Mhm.
reason to come in here and get all dirty and messy. So,
Yeah, save people thousands of dollars in mistakes.
and time, so
Yeah.
much time for a
Yeah.
lot of it because they just when you and you can probably relate to this when you have something that you're trying to learn and there you don't feel like you have a guide or a map
Hmm.
or a general inclination of how it's
Yeah.
supposed to go, you feel like you wander around half the time,
Yeah.
just
Mhm.
like pushing buttons and being like, what does this do, what does that do, how do I feel about this? And once you've got a general guide, I love handing those off to people because time is so precious. I don't want them to have to go through the same things as me. I already invented a wheel. Let me give you my wheel.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Let me show you how I made this wheel.
Yeah. And some people, I don't know if you have this experience. You'll have to tell me your experience with like sharing what you've learned with other people. There's some people who don't want it. And
Yeah.
I'm like, cool, you got to go touch the hot stove. Let me point you in the direction of the stove, you know?
Yeah.
And that part is a little hard as like a coach and an educator because I want to help them succeed as fast as possible, but sometimes they just got to learn it by themselves. And that's actually a specific learning type I have found where they
Yeah.
got to just learn the hard way and that's how they learn. So,
But it's an evolution because I remember when I first got started in real estate, my goal was to just buy as many houses as possible. And then my buddy, who's I've known since middle school, says like, I don't understand your business model. Like, how are you making money? You're not surviving off of $300 a door. And I said, dude, it works. Just leave me alone. It works. And then 4 years later, realized, okay, maybe I should have adjusted my strategy and just done more lending instead of trying to go out and buy everything.
oh my gosh, you know what? I don't know if it's evolution per se, because I'll tell you right now, I've got 3 kids. I've
Mhm.
got an 11-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 6-year-old. And my 6-year-old, just his personality and just the way that he learns in his
Mhm.
brain is he has to do it himself. Even if I tell him you don't want to do that, he's like, no, I really do want to do it. And that's just
Yeah.
part of his learning evolution of it. Um, and so I do think some people that's just their personality, but for
Yeah.
you, I feel like you found something that worked. And so you were like, I'm seeing results, and we need those micro wins. That's part of
Yeah.
the evolution process of learning. But I feel like and I've tried to talk about this a little more in like the operations realm is that the real thing that trips most people up who are trying to do any type of business or any type of system is that they don't revisit they don't revisit the system. Like they
Mhm.
don't audit. And
Right.
they don't sit down and have those hard conversations with themselves about where their time's going or where their energy's going or where their money's going. And that's like the golden nugget piece for me, where I'm like, you found something that worked. I'm so glad you took action because that's 75% of the problem. But once you took action, we should have revisited the action and been like, is this actually working, John? We should double check. Look, can we
Yeah.
double check? And
Yeah.
then that's where all that true learning comes in is you went in the weeds, you came
Mhm.
out, you assess. And you're
Right.
like, okay, here's the treasures that I found. That's not a treasure, that's a piece of trash. We can get rid
Mhm.
of that.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, I feel like my machine is back to maximum capacity. I feel pumped. I feel good. Back into the weeds. Most
Right.
people don't do that reset and come out.
Mhm. Yeah, I think reset it's important because you're not always going to pick the right move for you the first time, the second time, third time. I mean, the number of times I've failed, uh, I'm hoping the lending is the last one is will actually succeed, but like the number of times I've failed to get to this point, um, it's been it's been hard.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but you weren't doing real estate before that, right?
Right.
Here's
Yeah.
your first time. You're gonna suck at it. Like you're gonna
Yeah.
fail. But this is the part about learning that I think a lot of people were they had a bias maybe created or they had a program kind of implemented in their brain that like failure is bad.
Mhm.
Depending on the education system you went through, like that is probably what you were told. And this is where, like, going through the natural phase of learning, you have to fail. And it's actually, they've done studies on this. Like, when you get an answer wrong, you learn 70% faster because your brain registers the failure in a different way than it registers a success. And
Mhm.
the likelihood of you ever getting that question wrong again is very, very small. And so the failure actually escalates your learning process. And so that's where I'm like, get in the weeds. That you're making all the mistakes and you're learning that much faster because you're not analyzing everything. You still got to analyze, but not
Right.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's a good point because I was remember taking tests and then sometimes we'd be allowed to retake them and I would get all of the ones that I got wrong. I would get them all right because it just I guess I didn't know it was like that.
Yeah, because you already you're like, well, I know that one's not right, so it's got to be this other one.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's unfortunate that people have this perception around failing and seeing it as a bad thing. So I'm like, no, you are like on the really fast train here. You're not on like the wagon. You're on the train that's getting you there way quicker. It's a little bumpy of a ride, and you are definitely not enjoying some of that ride, but you're getting there faster, which means you get to enjoy the process.
Yeah, and that's another big thing is being focusing so much on the destination and not so much the journey. Like that's been a huge struggle, at least in the beginning it was. Like now I'm dealing with it, right? And learning
Yeah.
learning how to appreciate it.
Well, I mean, look at all those amazing stories you have now. I bet you
Mhm.
and I could sit and talk about all the stories from all the lessons you've learned for
Yeah.
hours, I bet.
Yeah.
And it would be so valuable to everybody that's able and willing to listen to it because
Mhm.
now they're like, oh, John already did that. He's teaching me what I should or should not be doing. And there's so much efficiency in just teaching other
Yeah.
people what you've learned because
Mhm.
now you're giving them a more updated map and they can choose to follow it. But I mean, but look at all the fun stories you get though too.
Yeah, I was getting my hair cut and I was just telling the person who's cutting my hair all the different things I was going through right now at this moment. And I mean, she was shocked. Like, this is what real life is in this world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't you love going and getting your hair cut and having those like really relaxed conversations because
Yeah.
it's one of those things where I think we try to normalize like everything that we're up to and that we're doing
Mhm.
because we're not going to stop.
Right.
But it's also to other people who are like maybe considering jumping into this pool or
Yeah.
trying this out. They're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm not sure how I feel about this," because it does sound like quite a bit.
Yeah. What do you think is the biggest cheat code to getting started?
Oh, uh, I would say the biggest cheat code is what I shared earlier, where I'm like 30% learning. Like focus 30% of your energy on the learning part of it, and then
Hmm.
focus 70% of your energy on taking action on what you've learned. Education, in my opinion, like learning to teach others or just like implementing education in your team or your business or your sphere is the most underrated tool for
Hmm.
scaling and optimization. Businesses and people and teams who implement core education or training, either where the teammates are educating each other or they're being educated and then they implement as a team,
Hmm.
they it's so sustainable. Like that's one of those things where it's like they buy back their time and they keep it bought. Like it's
Right.
not coming back. And so that would be my thing is like 30% on the progress learning part, 70% on whatever it was that you're learning, you know? Because so
Yeah.
many people, they get stuck in learning mode, right? They're like, I'm
Hmm.
just going to learn as much as I possibly can. But then it just sits there. And actually, it's not being processed in your brain the same way as if you were to learn it,
Hmm.
process it, like reflect on it, and then do it for 2 weeks,
Yeah.
right? And for a lot of learners, like um, there's all these different learning types. We could seriously talk about that forever. But for some types of learners, it's that implementing it into practice that creates the skill.
Hmm.
It's like, yeah, they know it, but when they implement it is when they become masters of it. And that's when it can make them money. It can buy back their time. It can scale their business. And it's like that one piece, just the implementation that most people skip over.
Yeah. Um, we could talk about like this stuff like all day.
Oh, we totally could. I'm like so game for that. We might have to do another. Maybe we'll do like another podcast. We can talk about something else.
Oh yeah, for sure. Um, so just for my curiosity, what is it that what was it about real estate that you liked and pushed you towards it?
Well, mm, full transparency. There wasn't anything that I was like brought into doing that. It was a decision that my husband and I had made to transition out of our W-2 mentality, basically,
Mhm.
was we walked away from our house, we walked away from our job, we to put all of our savings into doing entrepreneurship. And just we're like, "Oh, yeah, let's be investors. That sounds like a great idea." And so we didn't have something specifically that was pulling us to that. Maybe like a little bit of it would be great to have passive income and stuff. But once we got in this realm, I realized that we didn't have a really foundational why. We just wanted to get out. It was
Mhm.
like the reverse why. I just don't want that. So I'm going to
Yeah.
try. um, and ultimately, what got us into our business and like really committed was that we were running out of funds and it was either make this work or go back to a W-2, and we didn't want that so
Mhm.
badly that
Yeah.
I just like gritted my teeth and figured it out because I didn't want to go back to that. So
Yeah.
I don't know, probably not the answer you were expecting, but it's definitely what happened with it was that we hit that wall point where we're like either we figure this out and we make it happen or we're gonna have to go back to that. And that just sounded like emotional death at the moment. So I didn't want to do that.
But that's a really good answer because when I went to the last mastermind that Sub2 had back in 2023, Dean
Mm,
Graziosi came out and he spoke. And one of the things that he said was like people sometimes often focus on what is they want, but they forget about what are things that they don't want. And so when you want all these things, that's great, but it's hard to focus because you want all these things. What do you not want? And then build your life. Sometimes it's okay to build your life on the things that you don't want.
Yeah, I feel like that might even be easier sometimes when you're first starting out,
Hmm.
is like to find a why and a want that's deep enough and strong enough to carry you through some of these weeds.
Yeah.
I feel like that takes some time when
Hmm.
you're in a new realm and you're like, well, I think I know what I want, but I'm not sure. But I mean, you ask me any day what I don't want, and I can tell you, I write you a whole huge list
Yeah.
because I'm like, well, I don't want this and I don't want that. And I can tell you definitively what those are. The why and the want, that always takes me longer.
Yeah. Yeah. It's easy to say I don't want to go back to W-2 and because
Mm.
there's just things about it you don't like and but your why. Not everyone has a strong why.
I honestly, I feel like the why is kind of, I mean, you'll have to tell me if you feel the same way like this, but
Hmm.
I feel like the why, it's kind of like a piece of art. You know,
Hmm.
it has to kind of be discovered as you're creating it sometimes. You can see little pieces and you're like, I have this idea for this amazing art piece, but I really can only see the clouds. I have no idea what the bottom of half of this picture looks like.
Hmm.
And then as you're continuing forward, you're realizing, oh, no, this is really my why and this is
Yeah.
really my painting. And it's part of that journey, I think, is like you have a destination goal,
Right.
you know, you have some semblance of a why, but it's not deep enough for all of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do
I
you
mean,
feel like that?
I do because the overall picture, like if it's a really fuzzy picture, but I have an outline. And
Yes.
then as you keep going, more details start popping out, right? But if
Yes.
I talk about what I don't want, like why I don't want to go back to a W-2, it's very simple. Like I don't want anybody to tell me when I have to work, when I have to be at my desk. Like it's just
Yeah.
I want to be able to go and do whatever I want, whenever I want, with who I want, without worrying about the cost.
I love that. See, and that is
Mm.
where like some people might see that and think, well, it's not specific enough. And I'm like, no,
Hmm.
I think that's pretty specific. It's just
Yeah.
unique to John and
Hmm.
how John's going to interpret that. And the beautiful part about that, and this is something I think I've recently learned about myself, is that it's really just the flexibility and the freedom like you just described, is that
Yeah.
this is my general formula, but
Hmm.
as I evolve and adapt and change. And as my family grows and matures, and as I, you know, just acquire or, get rid of different things in my life, that's all going to mean different things. Because it's like right now, my kids are home and I'm going to have a different definition of what that freedom with my family looks like. But when my
Yeah.
kids are grown and out, I'm going to have another definition of what freedom with my family looks like.
Yeah.
And, but it's still that general formula that gets to be just tweaked, but it never changes. It's really just the freedom and the flexibility.
Right. The framework doesn't change, but the details may
Yes.
update.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, that's it. That's the catchphrase right there.
Yeah. Um, well, what kind of mindset issues have you had to get over? I know there's gonna be a lot, but what's the biggest one?
You know, that there was a lot. There was so many. There's two that specifically come to mind. The first one is that I didn't think that being an educator held any value in the world of entrepreneurship. I didn't think that that held value because everyone around here has just got so much like the get shit done mentality stuff.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it's good. Like you need hustle. You need that drive and that determination because it's not easy.
Hmm.
But I just didn't think that I like had anything to offer. So that would be the first one, is that education had no place and it had no value here. That was my first one. And then my second one was that I had no value to bring as a newbie, like when I was first starting. I see this in a lot of people that I talk to every day, where they think they are less because they're just starting. And that's because they're seeing everybody at like farther points down the road, and they're
Hmm.
like, "Well, I'm only starting." So, I don't. I shouldn't charge for that file, or I shouldn't charge for this deal, or my assignment fee should be less, or my lending percentage should be less because I'm less experienced. And I that was probably the biggest one, is that I've learned by overcoming that mentality that experience is a relative perspective, or like it's very personal perspectives. You're going to meet people where you come into a sphere and they're like, I've been doing real estate investing for 50 years. And I'm like, good for you.
Mhm.
But that comes at a cost, where I've been doing real estate investing for, 4 years, and I'm I'm already at this point.
Yeah.
And it took you 50 years. So this is where I'm like, that mentality of thinking that you have no value when you're a newbie, it's so detrimental to your progress, because you're already discounting something that you don't have control over. You
Right.
do not have control over how much time you have spent in something. You can't control. If I could have started this when I was 16, I would have, but that wasn't my path. So
Right.
just because I started it when I was in my 30s doesn't discount the value I have in this industry or in this space, just because I started later or I've only been going for 2 years. Do you feel like that was something for you?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I'm a CPA and I keep forgetting to tell people that I'm a CPA and I have accounting knowledge, but because I didn't spend a ton of time in accounting, but I have, like it just to me didn't seem like it really held any value. I didn't know accounting all that well. And
Mm,
but then I see the same thing I saw in other people before I realized it in myself, where people were making six figures in sales and they were struggling to find their way. And I said, just join someone's team, use your experience in sales to go and learn how real estate works. And like the sky's the limit for you.
mm-hmm.
And so yeah, for sure, like discounting your own experience is something that I see in a lot of just about everybody.
Yeah. Well, and like a perfect example of this is where like I never did transaction coordination before
Mhm.
2022. And I never thought I would be doing operations for like really massive real estate
Yeah,
organization.
yeah.
And what happened was, at either of those points when I was basically evolving into a new identity of like, I am a TC, or I am an operator, or I am an entrepreneur, at each one of those moments, I had to address that particular mindset and be like, just because I've only been doing operations for 3 months doesn't mean I'm not amazing at it.
Mhm. Right.
Because it's like everyone has aptitude and everyone has resilience and grit and fortitude and everything. But I'll tell you what, the number one determining factor of success or not is just like the motivation, the urgency. I'm like, how bad do
Mhm.
you want it? And this is where the get stuff done attitude is awesome, but it's also where it's just like that efficiency and that strategy of
Yeah.
like, I'm going to put 200% of my energy into doing this. And it doesn't matter if I've only been doing it for 3 months, I'm going to be at the top in 6. So
Right.
it's like you get to somebody where they've been doing it for 2 years and they automatically think they're superior. Where I'm just like, but I'm at the same level as you and I've been here for 6
Mhm.
months. Like
Yeah.
different mentalities, that's the biggest mindset shift I had to have, was I had to stop looking at this as an experience thing and look at this as a capability thing.
Yeah, that's so good because I think yesterday or the day before I had Michelle Bisson on, and
Oh,
she was stay-at-home mom too, and
yeah.
the way that she approached business was which how I wish I had done it too, where I built the team first and then I started going out and getting rentals, but instead my whole mentality was go out and get the next deal with the mess later, then get the next deal, then deal with the mess later, and so
Yeah.
because of it, still cleaning it up. But
Yeah.
for her, she's now running a $25 million fund because she did it the right way. It doesn't have to spend all that time cleaning it up.
It's yeah, and
Mm.
this is where I think moms, specifically, we're used to cleaning up a lot of
Yeah.
messes usually.
Yeah.
And so I think it's this thing where once we get into a space where we can have a little bit of planning or control or strategy or whatever you want to call it, we're like, okay, I know there's going to be a mess here.
Yeah.
Can we anticipate what that mess is going to be? Because I don't want to clean it up.
Right.
And that's what, in my opinion, that's what makes like mothers one of like the most amazing work strategic minded people because they've just dealt with a lot of stuff. Honestly, parents in general, because like my
Mhm.
husband right now, he's helping to do our homeschool and he's helping, we're sharing everything
Mhm.
because I do have to work a lot and he's the same way. It's like you go through those experiences of
Yeah.
having to take care of other people and you're like,
Yeah.
wow, I don't want to have to work this hard on something that keeps happening.
Yeah, that's something that especially with homeschool like parents and moms, because you constantly have to juggle different schedules. And I keep telling my wife, like, you're doing this now. In 10 years, 15 years, when the kids are all done, you're going to be able to run a multi-million-dollar business because you already have the PM skills in place. Like, this
Oh
is the most
yes.
challenging. Yeah.
Oh totally. I mean, and this is where I would, because your kids are super young still, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I would even dare to challenge that and say be like, nah, wait, just give them like 5 years and they'll be doing their own school because they're gonna
Uh,
want more control over their
mhm.
stuff. They're gonna be like, can I please just get my school done in the morning so I can go and do my other hobbies and my other things? You
Okay.
know?
Yeah.
That's what I've seen from other homeschool families like in my sphere is that it's really when they're young that you're teaching them how to learn and how they
Mhm.
learn best and giving
Yeah.
them those tools. And once they've got them, they're like, okay, I've got it. You can go now. Goodbye.
Oh, so it's like is it like business where it takes a lot of time in the beginning and then it just exponentially, okay, there you
Yes,
go.
yes, you're ultimately training your team. I'm
Mhm.
training and building routines and building systems and building
Mhm.
structures and making sure we have the resources and the books or whatever. But
Yeah.
now that we have these routines established and everybody knows how it goes, we all know our role and where
Yeah.
we play it, and we can pivot and adjust by having those hard conversations of we probably shouldn't be doing school at this time of day because we're all busy. We should change the time of day because we're
Mhm.
not being efficient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Taking these experiences and applying it to your own business.
And you know what's amazing, and I never thought this was going to happen, is that it's it's developing habits and skills with my kids that will make them natural entrepreneurs. It's crazy. Didn't see that one coming. But like we've seen them be self-starting and we've seen them like seeing these different aspects of just life, I guess, where they are motivated to learn those things. They're way more curious about those because they see that as their independence.
Yeah, for sure.
They
I
don't
mean,
want mom around.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But that's one of the things, like the big reason why I didn't like school is because, I mean, one, it killed learning for me. For a while, I did not want to learn anything new. And
Oh,
then second, because I mean, you take control. You learning is not just about being in the classroom and being told information. It's about
yeah.
going out and doing, sometimes working with other people and just experiencing the world outside the classroom.
Yeah. What do you mean by it killed learning for you? I'm so curious.
Yeah, so I was in public school and my whole goal was to just get by, get C's if I could. And I didn't like a lot of the subjects that I was learning. Um, and just the environment of having to just sit there and do nothing. Right. It's just sit there and stay in your spot for a certain amount of time, then go off. And then my interactions with my classmates weren't always the best. So for me, I associated school with learning and I hated school. So then I hated learning.
Oh, dang it. I feel like that happens to so many kids and so many adults. Like
Yeah.
they just have negative associations, but it's just from that one aspect of it. It's not like the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Dang it. Well,
But it's okay.
I'm glad you were able to separate them at some point. Now you can enjoy the learning now because you get to learn
Yeah.
what you want.
I actually get to learn a lot and I've learned more in the past 4 years than I have in my entire school career, I think.
Isn't that amazing when we take control of our
Yeah.
learning and we get to enjoy it and
Mhm.
progress and it's way more fulfilling, way more fun.
Oh yeah, for sure. Um, well, Ashley, we're running out of time, but we could talk for like hours.
I know
Uh,
we could.
so, how can people reach out to you and work with you?
So I am super available on Instagram. I'm also on Facebook, but honestly, like I just enjoy the platform of Instagram. I don't know,
Mm.
just like it.
Yeah.
But so if you want to message me on Instagram, you can find me at I am underscore Ashley Mason. Yes, I spell Ashley really obnoxiously with just an I. It's Li, and then
Mhm.
I'm done. So I am underscore Ashley Mason and just message me. I would love to check in and see how I can help, whether it's education or operations or efficiency or homeschool. I don't care. I love talking to people that are trying to do new things and have new adventures.
And you have a guide, right?
Yes. So I knew we were going to be talking a lot about education and just part of the learning process. So we actually have a very special guide that's just for John for now that is called Efficiency and Education Framework. It's basically a three-step process to take you from anything that you're learning and turn it into earning. So it's the learning into earning guide.
Mm.
And so, yeah, if you guys want to message me on Instagram and just message me efficiency education, I will send you the link. You guys can get that for free and be able to share it and help you just kind of break down maybe something that might be blocking you or that you might be stuck in, or maybe even just a new idea to take something that you already know how to do and make some money with it.
Very cool. I'm looking forward to reading that.
Oh, perfect. Yep, got those. But other than that, thank you so much, John. This was so much fun. I have loved watching your growth path, and I've loved watching you do these adjustments where you're having those reflection moments and you're like, I don't think I like this anymore. And then you pivot. I love watching that because for me, that's where you're in that magic golden zone of like real learning because you went in and you did something and now you're assessing it and you're like, ooh, we should change this. And then you go and you learn again and then you take action again. I love watching it. It's so amazing.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. All right. Thank you. Take care.
Yep.